If you search adulting paradox in social media right now, you will find endless discussions. Anxiety, burnout, too many choices, too many voices, but no way to hear your own. But is this really just a problem of today? Or is it actually a deeper side effect of industrialized society as a whole? In this episode, we're diving into this question and uncovering some perspectives you may never consider. How can something as small as an instrumental payment option on a food delivery app can tell you if an economy is in trouble? Why does AI need to be looked at more critically? Because it's not actually revolutionizing the world. What are the hidden money traps that people with less wealth are more likely to fall into? And why would someone who's brilliant at finance and economics, someone who could make a fortune in investment banking, but choose to stay in academia instead? Today, our guest is Dr. Stuart Mills, an expert in behavioral economics, studying how the economy shapes our decisions, how technology is reshaping society, and how, in a world full of uncertainty, we can figure out where we actually want to go. Let's get into it. Firstly, please introduce you a little bit for our audience.
Yeah, so my standard introduction, I'm Dr. Stuart Mills. I'm an assistant professor of economics at the University of Leeds. I also hold a visiting fellowship in behavioural science at the London School of Economics. And besides teaching on the MBA programme, most of my research is in behavioural economics, and what I'll call political economy, which is about trying to understand how politics and economics interact. And in an area which is coming to be known as digital economy, which is largely about the economics of technology, and again, to an aspect of the politics which goes into technology development.
And I remember AI is also one of your research subjects.
Yeah, and sometimes it gets separated as the economics of AI, and sometimes it gets lumped into digital economy. But AI is mixed in with all of that.
Yeah. So my first question is based on your education and your expertise. Why didn't you pursue a career in a major investment bank and fully become a financial dude?
Why didn't I? I did my undergraduate in finance, and I was naturally very good at it. The honest, there's two parts to it. In my final year of undergraduate studying finance, I got involved in a research project just for my own entertainment about something very different to what I do now. But it was an opportunity, and I thought I'd get involved. And we presented some of the results of that research project at a university seminar. And there was a guy there, a much more senior guy, in a totally different field to me, who, after I had spoken and presented these results, said to me, you should go and do a PhD. He thought there was something in, I don't know how I talked, how I presented, how it worked, which was academically inclined. And he actually became a really important mentor for me for many years. He unfortunately died quite suddenly a few years ago. But he was like the guy that said, you're much more valuable in a university setting than somewhere else. And I'm lazy, and it's very easy to be an academic if you're lazy. So there was an appeal to that. The other aspect to it was, I was studying for finance, but I was interested in technology. And I got it in my head that I was getting a degree that would very soon be automated away. So when I was thinking about doing a PhD, and typically you do a master's degree before a PhD, at least in the UK. So I was trying to figure out what master's degree I wanted to do. I thought, well, I should probably not study finance at masters. I should probably diversify a bit. So I studied economics at masters, basically to avoid being automated away. And again, I did my master's degree, and everyone that was teaching on that course was supportive, but also kind of like desperate to keep me there. Okay. And again, I don't mean this to brag, this is just how it happened. So I used to work odd jobs over summer, and I did a lot of consulting work, and I still do consulting work. So I have experience of industry, but I just got into the higher education system, and I had people around me that kept saying, stay in, do more and do more. And now I'm here, and I don't necessarily know what I do, but I'm here anyway.
Oh. And another question is about like our relationship in the class and the students. A lot of students, especially as far as I know, a lot of our Chinese students are really enjoying your class for us. So as an economist lecturer who interacts with a lot of international students, that's a question of us. What's your take on the cost effectiveness of studying abroad, especially in today's, sluggish economy, from the economist perspective?
From an economist perspective. I mean, I have to voice my bias of. I'm employed in a UK university that gets a lot of money from international students. I think having never studied internationally, but interacting with international students, I think the cost effectiveness of it will largely be a function of how much you put into it and how much you throw yourself into it. I think if you're going to study abroad, what you learn is perhaps less important than your willingness to be open to where you are and who is teaching you, and the ability to share experiences. I think it would be a bit too elitist of me to suggest that education in the West, for instance, is somehow superior to education in other parts of the world. I don't think that at all. And in many ways, I think it's a two-way street of I learned so much from you guys. So is it worth it? I'd say it can be, depending on how much you're willing to throw yourself into a new experience, and to recognise that it's a new experience, rather than sometimes I'm concerned that lots of people basically think they're shopping. And I don't think you get a lot out of it if you are just kind of shopping for a fancy degree from an exotic place. You really have to embrace the place you're in and
immerse yourself.
Yeah, immerse yourself. And like I say, you don't have to like everything about it, but there's definitely something about kind of recognizing that that different is good, even if you don't necessarily know why it's good, right?
In your observation, what common traits do Chinese students share that set them apart from other international students? And do you have some specific advices for these Chinese students who are unsure whether they want to stay in UK or go back to China to find a job, especially for MBA students or students in business school?
I mean, if we break it down, I can talk to what I know and perhaps what you can enlighten me on. In terms of what I see of Chinese students, I think positively, Chinese students support one another a lot. I am always quite amazed at how quickly there is camaraderie and bonds seem to form between Chinese students. And China's a huge country, a very diverse country. So I don't naively think it's because you're all from the same town in China. Right? There clearly is a kind of supportive network there, which, if you're going to a new country on the other side of the planet, knowing that you will be surrounded by people who will support you and share that experience. I think that's probably very important. And from my experience, I think Chinese students do that very, very well. That's on top of generally being quite diligent. You guys listen a lot, which I appreciate. The question of, is studying abroad and studying for an MBA going to put someone in a better position when they go back to China? It is difficult for me to say. My view is a lot of what I teach, a lot of what we teach on the MBA program at Leeds, I think we focus on practical skills and we focus on transferable skills.
Yes,
and my understanding of the Chinese economy, I think there's a lot of, obvious parallels in terms of how business works. There are obviously cultural aspects, but there are parallels to how business work. And while any idea or any theory about business education can be criticised, I think these are important ideas which high-level people in businesses all over the world take seriously. And so you would be bringing knowledge back to China or to wherever you're from, which will be applicable in your setting. The major skill is probably adapting that academic knowledge or the knowledge that's in the classroom to a practical setting and to that specific sort of cultural
bring it
setting.
to the real world.
Yes, yeah. And to an extent, that's why in my teaching, like as an academic, I find China very interesting, but in my teaching, I like to try and have conversations with people from the perspective of, well, what is it like from your perspective? Tell me about what it is. Because I don't know, but more importantly, because I want you to be thinking, okay, here's a idea from the textbook. How does it actually apply to the world I'm going to get back to?
And I think you mentioned that you're pretty interested in China's economy and a lot of Chinese business stories about that. Which specific part are you more interested in about that?
Right now, I'm. If I can be a bit academic for a second, I've always been interested in. It will typically be called world systems theory, but it's basically like the history of economics over centuries, And I think most academics in that space recognise that we are living through a period of transition now, where what academically we would call the long American century is over, and we are entering into what we will probably end up calling the long Chinese century. And that's really interesting academically to observe that transition. But there's also a political economic side to it of, well, how is China responding to its rising position in the global economy, its rising political power in the global economy? How is America, who is losing that position, responding? And as a British person, as a European, I also think it's interesting the attitudes that, say, my country is adopting, because I think China is a much richer, much more interesting, much more culturally diverse place than the common narrative in the West is. And so for me, it's very interesting just to educate myself about Chinese history and Chinese politics. And then if I can look at how the Chinese economic model or the Chinese entrepreneurial model, and then you can start putting together the pieces of, oh, well, that's kind of like how economics works in the West, or, most Americans won't admit this, but the Chinese development model is pretty much identical to the original US development model, right? And that's interesting. That's really interesting. And as someone that wants, I think I want the world to become a better place, right? We should draw ideas from everywhere. And China right now, yes, there are things that are not going great for them, for the country. But there are also things that I look at and think, that's incredible. I want that to happen in Britain. Infrastructure investment, right? Things like that. Like there are lessons to be learned from all sorts of different cultures. And China is such a interesting emerging force right now. I think everyone in the West should be doing a little bit to try and understand what's going on. Just as I think China if it is going to become a big global leader, which I think is inevitable, probably needs to, I don't want to say extend an olive branch, but perhaps embrace a bit more its world-leading position, if that makes sense.
I can't make a lot of comment about that because sometimes it is really strongly related to the policy and the government and so on. So yeah, I guess some of our audiences can send some comments about that in the reviews. Yeah, but I do agree with that. Another question, which is more like specific for the individuals, especially the young individuals in China, that I know a lot of friends, especially I see a lot more in online, that who are honestly lovely people, but seemed really trapped in the long-term anxiety and confusion. They don't know what kind of industry they're really passionate about. They don't know what kind of work they're really good at, or even they don't know what they really want to pursue in their life. Just living more comfortable or have more achievements. This situation is very, very, popular for discuss in Chinese social media. And a lot of people are just around 30 years old. Me and all my friends are discussing them all day. So do you feel like that is becoming more common among young people? Is it unique in China or it is more universal?
I don't think it's unique. I think it's a universal thing. I'll perhaps explain why in a little bit. And I'm not necessarily convinced it's a wholly new feeling, though I think perhaps previous generations have had more opportunities or flexibility in their economic lives.
It's more like timing advantage. Should we say that? Can I say that?
I suppose you could say that.
Yeah.
I think we're living in an economic period right now globally where there are mounting pressures around environmental resources, around economic inequality, even around demographics and population dynamics, which are historically unique to this period of time.
Yeah.
So I say all this because my kind of explanation of why I think people are finding themselves looking for meaning but not actually stumbling across it. My explanation for that is actually something which we've kind of lived with for 200 years, and I think it's industrialised society. But we have to recognise that the sort of the manifestation of those feelings now, and I do think I find it very interesting to hear that it's an experience in China, because I think it's a very, very prominent experience in the West as well. My sort of theory is that in industrial society is all about producing stuff. And I'm not going to say it's this to kind of imply that feudalism was brilliant, but there used to be a time where people could kind of live for the sake of living, that you would do things not because of the end result, but for the sake of doing it and so. And industrial society, where we're focusing on efficiency and maximising the amount of stuff we produce, and producing things largely because other people want them, I think that leads to a mindset where if you're not doing something because someone else values it, it's not worth doing. And if you think that through, well, in that headspace, you're never thinking about yourself. You're never asking yourself the question, what do I want to do? And to an extent, it's a luxury to be able to ask that question, because some people don't have enough money to buy food or house themselves.
Yeah. Every day you're thinking this question, actually it's your privilege.
But in another way, as I say, I'm lazy. I think we should have more conversations about less work. If you're working yourself to death and you're doing it just so you have enough money to buy stuff that doesn't actually bring you joy, like does it really matter if you're privileged, right? You're still stuck in that sort of situation. Something I think is interesting, if you look into the happiness literature and the well-being literature, so people who study what makes people happy. Oh. Once you have covered off your like basic material needs, so food and housing and water, the only real thing which makes people substantially happy in their life is human connection and socializing with other people. It's kind of negligible if you earn a lot more money or if you have a lot more stuff, or if you have a lot more status. That doesn't really make people happier. And yet we currently live in a society where status and money and more stuff is what we're told is good. And to get those things, we often have to give up time to socialise with people or to have romantic relationships or to have children, right? And so I feel like we've kind of got it backwards. And if I'm being optimistic, I think there's a great chance of marrying this idea that more stuff doesn't actually make us happier. Actually, a sense of community and being together probably will make us happier. With the fact that we probably can't sustainably keep producing more stuff.
Yes.
Right? And so I think there's a great opportunity here. But I to get back to your question, I don't think it's a unique feeling. And I do think it is a product of being told more and more and more is better. But the research and I think just talking to people, that doesn't bear it out. Actually, human connection and conversation is what we should prioritise.
Yeah, I'm really thinking about that. Thinking about the days I was working. It's almost 996. You definitely know that.
Yes, I
definitely know that. Because I don't have any spare time and vigor to interact with people. Sometimes if I have like a weekend, the only thing I want to do is sleeping all day and scrolling through short videos I don't know, it's very therapeutic and I really feel guilty because I think it's toxic, it's addictive, and it's, low quality, but that's the only thing I want to do. And I think, yes, that makes me more uncomfortable. And because
I think from a technology angle, I think in many ways we are automating social life, right? Social media is a form of automation. I'm increasingly concerned by some of the talk about young people and very young people forming relationships with AI chatbots. And I'm thinking like, they could be forming those relationships with each other, right? So I think to an extent we are automating social life, and perhaps we should get a bit more serious about thinking about the consequences of that. But in a world where you are working 996, or where you're just expected to put in all of the hours, especially if you're not earning that much money and you need to work a lot, then to fulfill your sort of need for socialization, as an economist, it makes complete sense that you would develop technology and automate socialization. But as a human being, it doesn't quite work.
Do you remember there is a movie called Her?
Yes.
Yes, Scarlett. I think that is a great movie to have some like. It's like a metaphor for that.
Yes, and at the end of the. Well, what's interesting about the movie, at the end, all the AIs disappear. They leave society, in part because they've learned to socialise with each other. And the humans that are left are devastated, in part because they've forgotten how to socialise. Yeah.
Oh, that's very sad and sorrow. Wow. And I think maybe it's going to be the choosing short years later. I don't know. I'm very doubt about that. And we will talk about AI later. That one is very interesting. That I also talked with some of our Chinese friends. Everybody was very excited about this. I don't know if it is a research or it's just a rumor, because they think it's true. And the idea is in the tough economic trends, 6 industries tend to thrive. The affordable entertainment, maybe like TikTok, and the pet care. Do you have pet?
Pet care.
Pet, yeah, cat, dogs.
Yeah, I have a lovely little cat called Bandit.
Oh.
He wears a bandana. Doesn't like other cats. Very antisocial.
Okay, but it is maybe belong to the pet care. I don't know. And the third thing is mental health. Even some like astrology, this kind of thing. And alcohol and tobacco, definitely I'm really into that. Adult entertainment, I'm into that too. And teach you how to make money industry.
Yeah.
Have you heard of this idea and do you agree?
I do. No, I do quite strongly agree. Myself and my co-author did some research a couple of years ago. We were trying to understand the behaviour of retail investors, so ordinary people who have relatively a small amount of money to invest, but they buy all sorts of different stock.
Yeah.
What we found via some quite crude methods was the amount of money that these people wanted to make on their investments was vastly more than the sort of realistic return on the stock market would be. And one explanation of it is ignorance, that they just don't know enough and so they don't have a good grasp. But what we found is once we, I won't go into the details, but once we factored in their expectations into our model, they didn't appear ignorant at all. They appeared exactly like we'd expect a normal investor. So the explanation that they were ignorant didn't quite make sense. And the one that we came back to was lots of these people are making these investments and forming their expectations because they feel like they have fallen behind in life. And that they want a high return on their investment and they expect a high return because it's the only realistic way of catching up in life. If they make a lot of money now, they're back on the trajectory they think that they should be on. And the fact that in tough economic times we see a rise in scam artists, that doesn't surprise me because scam artists sell this fantasy of getting ahead. But also, I absolutely agree, there is a rise in what I would call esoteric belief systems. So things like spirituality, horoscopes, right? All of that sort of stuff, which I think is really interesting. I think esoteric is really interesting. But the way I interpret it, and perhaps this is a naive interpretation, it's a search for an explanation about why things aren't going how you thought that they would be going, but you don't want to abandon the sort of dream of what you want. Right? So if you've been told all your life you'll become a millionaire, and then you're not a millionaire, you have a choice to accept you've been lied to and you're not going to become a millionaire, or convince yourself that there's just something that you're not doing right or something that is not quite right. And so you search for an esoteric idea. You search into spirituality or you discover God or whatever it might be. And again, from an investing perspective, there's some fascinating research from South Korea looking at Bitcoin investors and why people bought into Bitcoin. And that research basically says that people quite openly accept that they don't understand the financials of what they're buying. They're doing it on, the author describes it as magical thinking, that it's a leap of faith, it's an embrace of non-mainstream ideas. And it's all because they are looking for a way of achieving prosperity which they can no longer attain, no longer get.
So I was want to ask you, are there other industries that might also rise? But it seems like very hard to generalize.
In negative economies or economies that are struggling, you would typically expect to see a big expansion of debt and what I'll say is an increasingly financialized economy, by which I mean if you start seeing opportunities to pay for things in installments in places that you didn't normally see that, that's evidence of financialization, the introduction of I recall a few months ago seeing on a food delivery app that you could pay for a takeaway in installments, and I thought this is a terrible sign for the British economy. Once you see the proliferation of debt and the proliferation of finance, you know things are not going very well.
Very well. Do you have any other insights about that? What's a little like weak signal to show something is going wrong? I remember you mentioned a coffee one time.
So there's no sort of formal measure of consumer confidence. Though I had a friend who he measures consumer confidence by asking people how often they buy Starbucks, because it's a luxury item, but it's an affordable luxury, if that makes sense. And the idea is, if you're feeling good about the economy, you'll buy yourself more drinks in a week, and if you're feeling bad, you might reduce the number. My sort of informal measure has always been around collectibles. And what are people collecting, or what sort of luxury goods do people aspire to? Many years ago, it used to be all about fast luxury cars, right? And then maybe 15 years ago, I noticed that all of the kind of talk about collectibles and these items you show off, it shifted to smartphones.
Oh,
right?
Yes.
And today, it's all about shoes. And what I want to emphasise here is not that these items are becoming like more superficial, but that a car might cost you £10,000, a smartphone might cost you £1,000, and a nice pair of shoes might cost you 100, 200 quid. The aspirational item is increasingly becoming a cheaper item, and that to me is indicative of people are not able to achieve the previous aspirational, and so they're adjusting. And so culturally, we're adjusting what we buy to reflect the fact that more and more people can't reach the previous aspirational item. I don't necessarily think I have a main point, but I find e-scooters very interesting.
Sorry,
electric scooters. You know, those things those horrible things that people.
Oh.
Right? They've become the sort of the new item of transport, and I have to put it down to because people can't afford to have a car.
Oh.
I see like when people are swapping out the goods they buy, or choosing to buy cheaper. In the economics terms, we'd say cheaper substitutable goods. Right? When that is happening, I think it is a sign of things are not going very well.
Okay, I love that. That belongs to the behavior economy aspect.
I think you would. Yeah, it would fit under behavioral economics, or it could fit under behavioral.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about AI a little bit. Since AI is one of your research areas, could you share which specific direction within AI you focus on, and why did you choose that area?
I mostly focus on what I call the economics of AI, which is in part thinking about what is AI being designed to do and why is it being designed that way. And so I spend a lot of time thinking about automation and automation of knowledge work and things like productivity, and can AI enhance productivity. The other side of it is more of a political economy angle of how can AI be built, and sort of political and economic pressures which surround constructing AI. So I think about data access, the politics of data, the politics of data labeling, and the environmental impact of AI. and how all of those have political aspects and will affect how the technology develops in the future. So I dip into both. Right now I probably focus more on AI and productivity and automation, but I dip into both.
So in this area, or for the more general AI, what do you think is the most meaningful change it brings, and what worries you the most?
I mean, they might be the same thing. I think I'm skeptical right now today of the transformative potential of AI technologies. I think rather than seeing it as a positive, we should regard it as a negative, that AI is slotting so seamlessly into things that we already do. Yeah, a truly radical technology or a truly revolutionary technology should totally reorganize how we act in society. And the fact that it isn't, and actually it's just slotting into existing organizational structures, tells me that it's probably not as revolutionary as we think it is. And I have a substantial concern that rather than AI necessarily freeing up our time, making us more efficient, improving processes, it will probably contribute to a proliferation of, for lack of a better word, bullshit. More reports will be generated that no one ever reads. And there will be more documents that people have to sign, even though we know that no one reads them and they're pointless, right? There'll be just more busy work created, which will sap people's enthusiasm and so on. And that's because AI, if you think about it as an information management tool, gives you the ability to manage a lot more information. And human beings are susceptible to that. So if we can manage a lot more information, we're going to create a lot more information. But we're missing the fundamental question of whether it's worth creating that information to begin with. That's, in my opinion, that's largely what happened when computers came on the scene. And I think AI is just kind of a different kind of computational interface. So I see no reason why it would change. And that's my major worry, that we've got this big technology, and as a society we might invest huge amounts into it, and we don't ultimately see the payoff from it. I have other concerns, which are perhaps more sort of ethical concerns around AI being used in weapons systems, the sort of environmental degradation that can result from the technology. But speaking as an economist, I think organisationally, it may not lead to the efficiencies that we want, and actually a lot of people might end up being stuck in much more monotonous, boring, pointless work.
Do you remember the first day when you heard of ChatGPT and you used ChatGPT, like 3 years ago? Do you remember that? What's your feeling about that?
I remember the first time coming across ChatGPT, specifically ChatGPT. Because I saw people posting about it, and for about a week I didn't quite understand why everyone was so excited. And the reason for that was I'm a bad programmer, but I know how to program. And so for several months before ChatGPT came out, I had been using GPT-3 via the programming interface. Right? I'd written some code to use the AI model. And so I'd seen these responses, and I kind of knew the limits to what it could do. And I didn't really grasp why people were so excited about it, because to me it was really old. And then I realised, well, people are so excited about it because now you can interact with an AI via basically a Google search box rather than having to write a program. That to me was a big revelation. I think it is strange that 2 years down the line, people still think about it as an intelligence system.
Yes.
And that's not me saying I think it's strange that people haven't realised it's dumb. That's me saying, like, there's surely been enough time for a bit of technical understanding of what's going on to diffuse out, right? There is no thinking happening. It's just a predictive system. It's just predicting the next word. But yet, and this may be because I work in the behavioural space, I come across so many people who talk about who say ChatGPT thinks, or ChatGPT has this bias, or is this showing this behaviour.
Yeah.
And I think to myself, it's not though. It's just a statistical prediction machine. And I really do think, let me put it like this, the logic and the engineering and the innovation that has gone into AI models like ChatGPT is remarkable. It's brilliant and it's really cool, and we should really celebrate it. But it should also be called something like a diffusion engine. It shouldn't be called artificial intelligence. And we can still celebrate the engineering without having to convince ourselves that we are on the cusp of creating some strange intellectual being that no one understands. But it's only because of that branding that people now think that it is really, really smart.
Yes, and people want to buy in this idea, this concept.
As a kind of like old school AI researcher, I think it is really cool, the idea that we might be able to build a machine that can, for lack of a better word, think in a comparable way to human beings. I think that's a really cool thing. But that doesn't mean we've done it. You know? Just because you say it's intelligent, it doesn't mean it is intelligent. And to a large extent, I think it's cool because it forces us to question ourselves. And I forget what the original question is. My reaction to it when it first came out, I didn't quite get the hype. And I am still surprised to this day how much hype surrounds it. And I think there's a degree of sort of willful ignorance that it's not actually intelligent, but people want to desperately believe that it is something transformative.
Do you think the reason why people really want to believe is still about the whole economy? People want to have some new trend that, like a big opportunity, and it can bring us to upper stage, right?
No, I think you can't disconnect AI from the metaverse, from cryptocurrency, and to an extent from targeted advertising. Right? The past 10 to 15 years have, the future of the economy has been punctuated by these promises of radically transformative technologies that have each failed. Right? Yes. I do really. Not everyone, but certainly some people and some influential people really want to believe that AI is a new revolutionary technology that is going to fundamentally change how the economy works, is going to solve all of the difficult problems which we currently are facing, and that we are entering into a new golden age, but that we're entering into that golden age without really having to put a lot of effort in. And I think that same desire for prosperity without effort is what drove all those other previous failed technologies, and will probably lead to some sort of fallout in terms of the AI hype in the next couple of years, probably. And again, I want to say all this without undermining the fact the technology is really cool. There is a substantial achievement there. What I'm criticising is largely the branding and largely all of the politics which surrounds it. Right?
A question occurs in my mind. In your life, can you see just one thing that you think that is truly innovative, and you see it or experienced it, or you have like deeper understanding of it, and you think, oh, that is truly an innovative item, or a truly innovative thinking, or anything? Because I think you have a pretty high standard about innovation.
Yeah. I'm
thinking a little bit.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Setting aside questions of whether it's good or bad, my standard of innovation is, does it force a fundamental change in society?
Yeah, maybe not that big. It's just small thing you do.
Well, the only thing that really comes to mind is something like the iPhone or the smartphone. And largely because it led to such a massive spread in access to computing technology. I think I might even throw in the internet. I think the internet is such an incredible piece of technology, and the long history of the internet is so fascinating.
Definitely.
We don't use the internet in anywhere near its full potential right now. The internet is largely for advertising at the minute. We've built the most incredible global communication system, and we use it for advertising. But I still think if the internet, if widespread computing were really embraced or slightly used differently, we could see such a fundamental transformation in our society. And I think it speaks credit to those technologies that, even in my opinion, that they're being a bit misused and wasted, they have still constituted a fundamental change in how people live. So I do think that is truly innovative. I think that some instances around using AI for, say, cancer detection and medicine development, I think that's very interesting. Healthcare, yes. And there are almost certainly innovations in other sectors which I simply don't know enough about. The thing that's interesting about technology and innovation is the most important radical transformations often are quite small initially, and people don't initially see them coming. Like, silly example, the development of the blue LED. It took like 20 years more time than the red and the green LED. It's fundamental for modern lighting systems now. It's fundamental for killing bacteria. But it was so difficult to develop the materials that could produce blue light.
Oh, I don't know that before.
No, it's a fascinating story. But again, once we had that device, no one really notices that. But there's so much fascinating sort of innovation that happened in having to develop that.
Okay. Could you share one details behind the story?
Yes. So the way LEDs work is you pass an electric current through a strip of metal, and the metal bends in such a way that the light that is given off from I don't think it's the heat, but the light that is given off from the bending of the metal changes the colour that the light is. And the trouble with developing a blue light is it needs to kind of bend a little bit, but not too much. Oh. So you need to find the exact combination of metals that hits that point, and it's extraordinarily difficult to do. And this, I think he was Japanese. This Japanese engineer spent maybe a decade or more just working alone in his lab trying to build this light. I think he won the Nobel Prize for it, to be honest. Oh. But the development of the blue LED has transformed so much in society, and people don't notice because it's such a small little thing. Right? Yeah. But without the blue LED, you can't have multicolour displays.
Wow, that's a very beautiful story. Okay, thank you for sharing this. I have no idea about that. I think maybe that's another thing about this generation. We just take everything for granted, and you just hear everything just here for us. Okay. Let me think another part. Actually, in this AI, I was about to ask one question. Okay, I will try to ask, but I don't think you want to answer that. The question is, because some of my friends and some the netizens in internet always say they want to get into AI industry because now it looks like a promising money maker, and maybe that's your last chance to break the, the social classes, or it's like a hierarchy or status. And they want to have some advices about what kind of specific segments should they explore, or you don't want to ask this question?
No,
right?
Well, I think that there's a fundamental difference between my criticism of should something be done with AI and sort of the economic perspective of is someone willing to pay you to do it with AI. Right? The advice I heard a few days ago was find the most boring, monotonous task you can and automate it with AI. If you really want to start a new AI business, figure out the most boring, monotonous thing that a business is doing and find a way of getting AI to do it.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
And like I have friends who have AI startups. I think the sort of customer service chatbot space is interesting. I think the sales bot space is interesting. These are, again, setting aside my own criticisms, these are AI applications which respond directly to the sort of revenue critical parts of businesses. And if you wanted to create an AI product that a business could very intuitively see the value proposition of, creating something where it directly impacts revenue streams or it directly reduces costs would be my advice. If you're developing an AI product which is about will help your staff navigate their emails better so that they can be more productive workers. I don't think there's much there, because from a business perspective, well, where's the impact on the bottom line? Okay, so my workers who send emails all day become a bit more efficient. What are they going to be doing with that extra time?
Yes.
You're not actually offering the business a value proposition. But if you say, put this chatbot in, it will increase your sales by 20%, or it will reduce the cost of customer service by 30%, then you are directly showing them the value proposition. So that would be my advice.
I think that's very strong and solid advice for that. And there is another subject is, over the past couple of years, the cross-border e-commerce has been a hot topic in Chinese social media. Actually, we heard a lot of legendary stories about how ordinary people just making fortunes from it, and many have started selling courses how to launch a cross-border business. So what do you think has driven this trend? And where is the big opportunities and risks?
Have you ever heard, well, this is my perspective, maybe I'm misunderstanding the background. Have you ever heard the phrase, the person who makes money in a gold rush is the person who sells the shovels?
No.
The idea is, if there was really gold to be found, the person who knows there's gold there would be going and getting the gold. If there's someone standing there saying, there's gold over there and I'll sell you the shovel to go get it, there isn't gold over there.
Yeah. Right? He's making his gold by telling this.
Yeah. Nobody is... If someone is selling you information, the information they're selling you is less valuable than the amount of money you're giving them. Because if the information was actually valuable, they'd keep it to themselves and they would be getting the money. So again, maybe I'm perhaps misunderstanding the sort of cultural context, but if there's a growing industry of people saying, like, here's how to start a successful drop shipping business or a successful e-commerce business, my guess would be there isn't actually that much money in it. And there is more money in convincing people that there's money in it than there is actually in that business.
But I think there are some rules or policies about, actually I'm not very sure about this, maybe later I can get more information, that because the government are encouraging people to do this, and because today, a lot of Chinese items still have the advantage of the low cost and of the materials and human labor. So there are a lot of rules that encourage them to send these things into the southeast of Asia or Dubai or this kind of places.
Well, I suppose from a government's perspective, or from the Chinese government's perspective, this sort of entrepreneurialism will impact growth, increasing China's exports will increase the amount of wealth flowing into the country. And if that is going to individual people rather than to large corporations, it will probably have a positive effect in terms of income inequality and local community development. So I could see why the Chinese government would perhaps want to encourage it. and I also do acknowledge that China as a industrial manufacturing hub is world leading. If you are a Chinese entrepreneur with relatively easy access to that industrial manufacturing base, you can perhaps start a cross-border e-commerce business that will genuinely deliver value to international customers in the same way that, in a different way to, say, if you're in Britain and we don't make anything, then you're probably not you're probably not exploiting a genuine opportunity there.
But you're saying that maybe if you just working in manufacturing industry, maybe you can do this. But a lot of people they think they can have a computer and they can buy some things, they can doing some things, and they can selling some things. So you don't think it's gonna work easily, right?
The answer to everything, it depends. From a Western perspective, if I heard that business model, I would be extremely skeptical. If I'm thinking about it from a Chinese perspective, I do think that the local advantage of being able to get a large amount of goods at a very cheap price potentially does mean it is a viable business. If you have millions and millions of people doing it in China, though, I imagine sooner or later that becomes an unsustainable business model. But my gut instinct would be to say perhaps because of China's industrial base, it is a different proposition. But from a Western perspective, I would be skeptical about its long-term, its longevity.
Okay, here is a question a little bit related to the golden age, because some Chinese citizens are joining the comparison between Japan and China right now, because I think Japan's golden age ended within the early 1990s, bubble burst, followed by the so-called lost decade. But actually it's longer than 1 decade, right? And there are a lot of similarities, seems to have some similarities about the debt crisis, the real estate crisis, the aging population, deflation. So do you think it is reasonable to draw the comparison with that?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
So there is increasing discussion of the Japanification of China, as economists call it. The background I would give is Japan comes out of the Second World War devastated. They get loads of investment in manufacturing. They become a massive manufacturer and a huge global exporter. By the 1970s, they are world leading and they are developing their own sort of managerial styles, which set the pace for global manufacturing. And an awful lot of their manufacturing is based on they have an artificially low currency, or they had an artificially low currency, which meant their goods were always cheaper than American-made goods or European-made goods. Around the 1980s, America did not like this situation. There was lots of concern. So Japan became the second largest economy in the world. There was lots and lots of concern that Japan was going to overtake America, and lots of industries in America were moving overseas, moving to Japan. In the 1980s, the American government pressured Japan to change its monetary policy so that the yen became more expensive. And that kind of overnight killed the competitive advantage of Japanese manufacturers. And since then, the Japanese economy hasn't really recovered. It's still a large economy. It's still a big exporter. It still leads in electronic manufacturing. But it is... its ability to grow has been substantially hindered. Meanwhile, it's an ageing population, and when you've got low growth and an ageing population, the government has basically fallen back on continuously increasing the amount of debt to cover these costs. And it's a very unique economic situation. Their debt to GDP is something like 300%. Something like that. there's lots of parallels between what happened in Japan and what could be happening in China today. Both countries have gone through a very similar economic model. China's begins around the time of Deng Xiaoping's reforms, if I'm correct in that. And China has exploited a large population. I say exploited in economic sense. So exploited a large population of relatively cheap labour to increase its manufacturing base. It has exploited a cheap currency to pump out its goods to the rest of the world. And all of that money now, because of Chinese cultural sentiment, a lot of it goes into saving, a lot of it goes into property. And the Chinese population now is getting older, demanding a higher standard of living. Increasingly, there is a demand for jobs which aren't manufacturing intensive, knowledge work jobs. And that is forcing China to pivot its economy and pivot its economic model away from an export-led growth model, at the same time that the rest of the world is putting pressure on China because of China's rising dominance. And so the Chinese economy right now is struggling. And China has a very high debt to GDP, not as high as Japan's, but it is going up. And its growth by Western standards is still astonishing, but its growth is consistently failing to hit the growth targets of the government. So there is a rising concern that China is following the same stagnation as Japan. In my opinion, the fundamental difference to recognise is that Japan and Japanese growth and Japanese prosperity was heavily reliant on the United States' foreign policy. And Japan was, and to an extent still is today, a client state of America. Lots of Japanese policy was and is directly influenced by Washington. That's partly why, say, Japan allowed its currency to appreciate and it killed its exports because of American pressure. China doesn't face that pressure in the same way. The US president isn't going over to China and telling them what to do. China faces the pressure in a much more conflictual way of things like trade wars and so on, and international trading blocks. But I think the Chinese government and Chinese economists understand that dynamic. I think the increasing efforts by China to develop its own trading blocks, to lead economically in its region, and to invest in other countries reflects a strategy of developing Chinese economic leadership, which Japan never did, and to an extent I don't think they ever could have done. So there are parallels, but there's also substantial political differences there, which mean right now, today, I am hesitant to say China will become like Japan.
I got it. There's a fundamental different reasons for that, and they can do different ways or use different factors to influence how to break the stock. Okay. I think I can ask this question, like, for individuals living through these turbulent times, what should they know? What should they adapt as their principles about their economic mindset? Like no investment.
It's a very
Save your money.
I first of all, I don't give financial advice, and despite often being right about the politics, I seem to make terrible investment decisions. I don't give financial advice.
But I think the principle, the mindset.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. The key thing about economics, or at least the economics I practice, it's not that you get things right. And actually, a lot of the time, I will get things wrong. The key thing is to try and look at things which happen every day in the world or in whatever country you care about, in whatever industry you care about, and be constantly trying to put them into the larger picture, to have a model, to have an idea of the larger picture in your mind, and to also be willing to extrapolate that from that and think, okay, this is what I think will happen. Again, most of the time you'll be wrong, but it doesn't actually. It doesn't matter that you're right or wrong. What matters is that you're paying attention. And so if I were to talk about China and the United States, a major criticism I have of, say, British people or Westerners in general is I don't think we spend enough time paying attention to either what is happening in China or to the politics of America. I have no idea what's going to happen in the growing tension between those two countries. But I can probably hypothesize some things because at least I am trying to pay attention. So I think the key thing to economics, if you want to adapt your financial planning, your career planning, if you're concerned about the turbulence ahead, I wouldn't offer one singular piece of advice. It would rather just be pay attention and don't kind of take as a given the headlines about the economy or the headlines about politics. Try and develop your own model of the world in your mind and constantly keep it updated. I'm not sure that's a great answer, but that's sincerely what I believe.
Maybe that's the first principle because your own structure, your own your philosophy in your mind. But I think in me and all my friends, actually in our education system, we don't have something like that. We just study math. About the multiple, about the divided score or something. And actually, I think, because, I just born in a normal family, and my parents don't have some investment strategy. If they have a little bit of money, they're going to borrow some money from our relatives to buy a house. Yeah. Very simple. And they're going to have some savings. They're going to put some money on the stock. And then it's very simple. And suddenly when me and our friends, a lot of people like us, when we come to 30, and some of us come to abroad, we're very shocked, wow, how did you guys know a lot of things about how to manage your money, how to have your your economic thinking? We don't have that. And some of us trying to learn something on YouTube, let a person to tell you, okay, I read these 10 books and I'm gonna summarize something for you. But I don't think that works. So what are the advices from you? How to build this in this age?
Well, the first thing I'd say is I think from someone like your perspective, you're probably getting a biased view of what people in the West are like because I think most ordinary people in Britain share the kind of sentiment that you're expressing of you get a job, you work, and you aspire for some various reasonably basic things, buying a house, having a car, whatever. And most people do kind of just go off this sort of default set of rules in life. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think a good society should be one where people don't really need to worry about whether they're going to be able to get the essentials to life. I don't necessarily want people to have to spend all of their time obsessing about the tiny changes in the economy. But in terms of if you did want to do that, how do you? I guess essentially what you're saying is how do you develop critical thinking skills or embed critical thinking skills into everyday life? And my advice is always really bad, but it's always read everything.
Read everything.
I will say this, I don't mind. Most academics I know are really boring and they do really boring research. And it's not that it's bad, it's that it is very, very specific to one particular thing. And I really, really believe that you should read widely and read eclectically and expose yourself to all sorts of different perspectives. In part because it just makes life more interesting, but because it shines different perspectives on things. So when I say read everything, I mean don't just read a textbook because I set it, you know. Read something you have chosen. Read something that read something because I say you shouldn't read it, you know, things like that. And when you do read, read into the fine detail. Like I always tell people, read the footnotes because the footnotes are where the actual interesting stuff is. I know it's a bad answer. That I guess you can extrapolate it. Expose yourself to a wide variety of views, and be willing to be wrong. That is the best way to question yourself and to see different perspectives. And you're not looking for a right or wrong answer. You're just looking for information. And I find that if I read something that's new and that's interesting, I immediately don't understand it at all. And then months later or years later, I might connect the dot. And it might be complete nonsense. I might be making it up in my head. But I'll connect the dot and it'll be interesting. And then maybe something comes from it. You don't need to understand it straight away.
And what's your opinion about like talking with someone maybe know more knowledge in this aspect than you? Do you think it is useful, or you maybe gonna some mistake?
I mean, you know from our conversations, I think conversation is really valuable. I've found myself in the past few months being asked quite a lot, like, what is my sort of ambition in life, or what am I trying to achieve? And the best answer I can really come up with is I just want to be able to talk to people about interesting things. So I think conversation is really, really important. I also think it's really important to have conversations as equals. I sincerely believe that, my job and my qualifications that sometimes is a negative because people
think you're smart.
Yeah, and I'm not. but more importantly, they go into the conversation thinking they're less smart than me. And doing themselves down or lacking in the confidence to have a discussion. And I don't like that on the basis of it's not like I know anything more. It's not that I know more than anything else. I just know different things. It's not that I know more than someone else. It is that we all know different things. And a good conversation is often one where both people are looking to kind of exchange some of the knowledge they know. And so the second aspect of good conversation and kind of what to me makes a conversation worth having or not is whether people enter it in what I'll call good faith, whether people are willing to take time to listen, whether people are willing to take time to think through their answers and to really engage with one another. I have tried to cut it out of my life, but in the past few years I have found increasingly talking to non-academic people in a social setting, I found I'm having a lot of conversations which aren't happening in good faith, where I might take time to articulate a point, I might take time to listen to other people's points, and at the end of it I've just left with this feeling of there was nothing I could say, there was nothing I could do, I was talking to a brick wall. Those are the type of conversations which I find very, very dissatisfying. Those are the type I would like to avoid. And I think if you want to make sort of conversation part of your learning experience, or if you wanted to talk to someone who might share a similar position to me, entering into that conversation in good faith is very important. Because most people that know something about something are really eager to share it. Like all academics are narcissists at the end. We just want attention.
And you said something like you want to Like, I think that's your philosophy. You try to treat people equal. You try to interact with people equally. From which moment you just intend to let yourself to do that?
I remember having a PhD meeting once, and I only remember this because someone wrote it down, and I thought that's very nice. I said I have a self-destructive sense of fairness, and I've always really strongly acted on a belief that people should be treated fairly. And I've never been a very good student, but in high school I was particularly bad, academically and also saying things I shouldn't say.
Wow, I can't believe that.
And a lot of that was because even back in high school, back when I was a teenager, I distinctly remember feeling that teachers and students should not have a sort of hierarchical relationship. Like, when I was a teenager, I knew nothing, but that didn't mean I should have someone talking down to me just because I was ignorant. And today, as a academic, I experience it the other way round, and I honestly can't say that it's natural to me. I find it very, very strange to have people treat me with deference and to kind of treat me as some sort of expert or as something special. I find it really, really weird, because I think outside of this academic setting, if I was just walking down the street, you would not bat an eyelid, you would not be concerned.
You're just a dude.
Yeah, exactly. And so I don't think it was an active philosophy of mine. I just can sincerely say that I have always been very uncomfortable with unfairness, and I've always been very uncomfortable with authority, both when I've had it and when I have not had it. That's all.
Do you think it is from natural or from some your family education or some people you really admire?
I'd have to chalk it up to something being natural. I can't put my finger on a particular sort of childhood moment which might have formed these feelings in my mind. It's difficult to say. When I think about so the philosophical touchstones in my life, it all kind of comes back to this idea of deference to authority for its own sake is not good. You should respect everyone, and you might choose to particularly respect people who know something or do something which you find particularly valuable. But deference for its own sake is often just a sort of mask to hide the fact that there is nothing worth listening to there. The person who says respect me because I have a PhD should not be respected at all. And you can replace PhD with any sort of thing. And so I don't deny that is like the anarchist in me talking. But I can't really place an origin for it. All I can say, be it the music I read, or the philosophy, the music I listen to, or the philosophy I read, or even the philosophy of science which I read, which is a big part of being an academic, it's all grounded in this idea of relativism and, for lack of a better word, anarchism, and this belief that good things can come from all over the place, all over, and that we should not putting barriers in place to arbitrarily separate people because we don't actually know what good and bad is. We just have to go for it and see what happens.
But in your life, is there some story about maybe someone just act not like this, and this person is have to surrounding with you, and how do you interact with them? You will say something to them, you want to pursuing them, change it, or you just keep away, or will you struggle about how to do with them? That happens on me.
Well, this might sound very patronizing. In my personal life, I hate being told to do something when there is not a good reason for it. And there may well be a good reason for it, but if I'm not given that reason, I regard it as being disrespectful. Right? If there is a good reason, fine, I'll do it. Even if there is a bad reason, but I understand why the bad reason exists, then I'll do it. Right? But I hate this whole idea of being told to do something. At the same time, I definitely think that lots of people, even if they don't necessarily think about it this way, kind of like there being guideposts and there being a degree of sort of paternalism and someone saying this is what you should do at this point. I mean, lots of people like that. And I say that because there are definitely parts of my life where basically I don't want to try, so I appreciate there being someone to tell. And so I think if I were to summarize, put those together, it'd be, there's nothing wrong with authority and having someone take charge and setting the rules and so on, but you should always be allowed to question it and actually responding to that questioning and seeing people as people that deserve engagement is an act of respect. And if you're not willing to do that, then you don't fundamentally respect someone. And hence it goes back to my idea of the self-destructive sense of fairness. I really think everyone should be treated fairly. And if you're not willing to take the time to discuss with someone their ideas or to justify your own perspective on things, it's disrespectful. It's a sign that you don't care enough about that person.
There is another question, maybe not related to any story and moment, but I'm really curious. So you sound like you really pay attention about your heart or your spirit. And I think maybe I describe it a little bit weird, and you got what I mean, right? You really pay attention on this part, you value this part. You think things, you interact with people intentionally. And during this journey, now do you still have some part in your mind that you're a little bit struggle with, that you are not unsure, you're a little bit unsure about what it is? It is a little bit dark. It is a little bit about fear. It is a little bit about something you cannot control. Do you have this small part in your heart right now, or you never faced this kind of struggling? It sounds like so psychology.
No, I like it. This is a genuinely true story. When I was a teenager, I came across a punk rock song called Nihilism, and I didn't know what nihilism was, so I looked it up, and it's the belief in nothingness, right, or the belief that nothing really matters. You know? And as an edgy teenager, I thought, oh, that's cool, I'll become a nihilist. Right? And I used to say this to people, and I thought I've realised in retrospect that I didn't really understand what nihilism was, but it's there's lots of kind of French philosophy around nihilism, but what we kind of need to appreciate is there's one guy called Sartre who writes about nihilism, and he says nothing matters and we should all basically be depressed because of that. And there's another guy called Camus who says nothing matters, and that means that we have a lot of agency in the world to decide what we're living for and what we care about. And I have always gravitated towards Camus. And And so I very much believe in acting intentionally, that you should try and have a reason for what you're doing. It doesn't mean it has to be rational. That's a different thing. But you should try and have a reason for what you're doing. But if there is anything that holds me back in that regard, it is this kind of affinity I have with nihilism and with this kind of understanding that, well, at the end of the day, it probably all doesn't matter. Lots and lots of academics spend a lot of time thinking about legacy and thinking about the importance of what they're doing in the world. And I don't share any of that at all. I'm quite satisfied with the knowledge that in 10,000 years, no one will remember anything I've done. Right? That's a very nihilistic view of the world. But at the same time, I remember once being told that it's possible to have best friends who were never alive when you were alive. And what they were referring to is it's possible to read something or to watch something or to listen to something and really get into it and really resonate with it and really sort of critically reflect on that thing in your own life and to form a meaningful relationship, even though you've got this sort of audience-author split. And so that helps me be comfortable with the fact that nothing I do is really going to have a big long-term impact, because I can read the works of people like Herbert Simon or Paul Feyerabend, and these guys, Simon was alive when I was alive, technically. but these guys died years and years ago. Right? I have no connection to them at all, but I love them and I can read them as if they are friends. And I guess to try to tie it all together, I think if I act intentionally, then someone at some point can read the things I have written or listen to the things that I have said, and even though I've never met them, I might be long dead, they can form some sort of relationship with that. They can have a friendship by proxy.
It's an echo in the air, in the history.
Yeah.
Have you... Why are you giggling? Because I think this question, is it offensive? I'm not sure. And I think because to be honest, I still have a lot of ambiguity about the Western culture and Chinese culture. In China, especially in my mother's generation, they're very offensive. They just ask a stranger, like, how much money you made every month? They just ask that. And she eats in a restaurant, she can ask the owner, how much money you make every year? And she will directly talk with me if she had the same restaurant in the street in front of the owner. So, it's a very, very different culture. And I want to ask you, have you ever worried about money while you growing up? Because you seem like very dedicated yourself into academic, and you don't have very complicated things in your mind.
I mean, explicitly, have I ever worried about money? No. I was very fortunate that my dad had a very good job, a very secure job, and financially I've never had those concerns. And that probably contributes to sort of my lack of worry about other things in life. So I'm very privileged in that regard. At the same time, I come from a very old family, not in like an aristocratic sense, in the sense that my family has lived in the same place for 150 years or so. So we have those stories. We know exactly what people were doing back then, and it doesn't take that. You don't have to go back that far, really, to essentially see a time where. I consider myself working class in a Marxist sense, but in a cultural sense, I'm middle class. But my granddad was a labourer. He was a working class guy. My great granddad, a labourer, working class guy. He fought in the Royal Navy. His ship got sunk 3 times. Luckily, he knew how to swim. So, and like I say, my granddad is still alive, and literally the buildings that they were children and grew up in still exist. So I can go back to my hometown and talk to people who can tell me stuff. And so, well, I am an academic now. Well, my dad did very well for himself and earned a lot of money. I have always had that familial history of like, this is where we came from, and to an extent we're still here, you know. And maybe to tie it into the sort of like, am I a minimalist, or do I not care about too much stuff? I think I just have a greater appreciation of history than most people. That's or the average person, because from how I was raised, it's always been such an important part of. I've known exactly who came before, and it's always been drilled into me that there will be people that come after me, and think about the people who come after you. I know to an extent I think that's actually quite a sort of Eastern perspective on the world. I don't think my family growing up in the northwest of England were thinking that way, but it's always been built into me that there's a history, there's a continuity there.
In my mind, I've also have a picture that you're in the town. There's a TV series very famous in UK, like Downton.
Downton Abbey.
And you're just like that. I don't know why.
No. It's certainly not like that. And as an economist, I find it interesting that. So I can look at how Britain has changed and at how different economic policies and different governments, and I can put a finger on, okay, this policy affected my family in this way, right?
Oh, yes.
And I've always found that very interesting. It's always ingrained in me a very, very deep sense of, politics matters and economic decisions matter because they affect people's lives. And like I said, I don't know how many people have those experiences, but it's an important thing to me. It shapes my thinking about economic life.
Is that the first reason why you want to learn that?
It's probably part of it. I was in high school. I was very intuitively good at physics. I'm not that great at maths, but I'm very good at like imagining or building models of things in my head, which is what you need to do in physics. But after a while, I remember thinking to myself, I don't really care how heavy an electron is. Like that. It doesn't matter how heavy an electron is. It's not really going to change anything about the world. It's not going to really affect people's lives.
It is existing.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing I can change about nature and the fun. Right? But economics, you can think through problems, and you can. I wouldn't necessarily say I advocate to try and change the world, but you can think through problems, and you can interrogate why things are the way they are, and you can perhaps start imagining alternative ways that things would be. And I see there's a much greater opportunity to change things in a way which I would deem meaningful in economics than in.
But then you changed the idea because you mentioned now you just want to read this thing, write this thing, even no one influenced by that. So you changed? Have you pivot?
No. I just contradict myself. There's nothing wrong with being a contradiction. I really think that's important. There is the idealist in me that thinks that everyone can affect change in the world, and then there is the part of me that realises that no one is actually listening. But maybe this is just I know lots of academic economists in the UK who have basically now come to the belief that no one in the government is ever going to listen to them. And lots of people have just given up trying to change anything because we constantly get ignored. Right? And lots of people get very sad about that. Lots of people get into denial, and they think if they just write more or they shout more that things will change. And they might eventually, I don't know that. But for me, I've always sort of started on the first principle of I'm lazy. So if I'm going to do something like writing or reading something, I want to do it primarily because I enjoy doing it. And then it's nice if it, has an effect in the world. But if it doesn't, at least I enjoyed it in the process. So I've not lost any of it.
I got you. And do you want me to share your website in the program, or you don't want
I mean,
to?
you can do if you like.
I definitely like it. That's interesting. That's my first question. I can't repeat your website name. That's weird. CU2LH. What's that? SIU. Yeah, SIU. What's that? It sounds like some medicine, dangerous medicine.
I chose that name because I didn't want it to be easy to find. So the idea of the whole website is I wanted it to exist just because I enjoyed doing it. I coded the whole website myself, and I taught myself how to do it. There's no way for me to see who reads it or how many people read it. So whenever I post on it, it's just because I want to post on it. That I get no feedback, so I don't get that adrenaline hit of things getting liked or shared or whatever. And so part of that sort of philosophical purism was, I thought I don't want it to be easy to find either. I want it, if people, again, it's act intentionally. If people want to read it, they will go and read it, right? But I don't want people to just accidentally stumble across it.
But why do you want to make everything by yourself? You can find some help definitely, but you believe in the decentralizing the internet. Is that related to you decide to do this independent?
Well, I think, on the one hand, I think that we should all try and do as much for ourselves as possible. That's a very punk thing, right? Do it yourself. And I am concerned within, say, an internet domain, but you can apply it to other domains. I'm concerned that increasingly we are sold products and services which reduce our skills and make us more reliant on consumption rather than on ourselves. I dislike, for instance, before social media, people used to have blogs, and some people used to make blogs, and then social media came along, and in some ways it's great, right? Standardized format, you can search up things relatively easily.
In one platform.
But in other ways, nobody now knows how to make a website, right? And our ideas of worth and online worth now are shaped by the like button and shares and how many people are following us. These are things that were just invented by someone in Silicon Valley, right? But now they are so psychologically important to us. I think that's a dangerous thing. And I think there's something to be gained out of purposefully rejecting something that is pre-made and doing something for yourself, even if it is not that good, right? My website is not very good, but I did it. I did it myself, and in doing so, I gained power over things like social media metrics. I gained the opportunity to think about design and how I want it to look, and I learned an awful lot of stuff. So now, if I wanted to make another website, I could. I don't feel like my online presence is governed by signing up to different websites. And like I say, you could apply that philosophy to all sorts of parts, to different parts of life, and philosophers have. As a 21st century person, I obviously apply it to the internet more than anything else.
That sounds pretty punk. So, okay, one last question. If you can use one song to represent you, which song? Do you have any idea? You can think in a little bit. Or if you think it's hard to answer, just use one song to introduce to me to this program.
One song's right.
You're playing drum. Play the song.
Now I'm trying to remember the song title.
Or you can say your iPod.
Yeah, my iPod's over there.
You can grab your iPod. You can grab your iPod. It's okay.
Like your viewers won't believe this, but no, there is an actual iPod. You'll have never heard of them. They
You
are.
should zoom me.
What are they called?
And I know in your iPod you used to have the 2024 song.
Yes, yeah. And this is a new album, by the way.
Yeah.
So this is from an album that came out this year by a band from both Leeds and Manchester. So, it's called "Do Cavemen Dream of Analog Sheep" by Animal Byproducts.
That's a title?
"Do Cavemen Dream of Analog Sheep."
Oh, okay.
And it is all about how modern working life sucks.
Okay, we can search it right before this. Okay, thank you, Stuart.
You're